Okay, really interesting listening to the discussion earlier today. I have two comments to make, really. One of them, what is the most important starting point of any pitch you are writing? The answer is, how long have you got to pitch? If you've got somebody like me who's moderating pitching sessions, as I said earlier, I am a horrible, horrible person. If I have said you've got 3 minutes, I will switch your microphone off at 3 minutes. Not everybody is as horrible as me. But remember that you've been given a certain amount of time to get your message across, and any time you take over and above that is coming out of somebody else's time or is pushing the whole event late. So one of the things I would always say to you, before you start writing the narrative, your slides, how long have I got? How much can I say in that time? If you have got 3 minutes, you can probably get through 6 slides at the most. Maybe 7 if it's very, very snappy. So do bear that in mind, because that is a focus for you as you go forward. We also had an interesting discussion about the difference between features and benefits. There was a very, I said, I've done quite a bit of mentoring over the years in different parts of the world. And I often get somebody come to me and they're telling me about the features, the functions of their technology. And I have a question I ask every single one of them next. And the question is, so what? If you build it, so what? And that's the impact question. If we build this, this is what we're going to achieve. This is the difference we're going to make. So always look at anything that you've done and ask yourself, so what? How will I answer that question? It's a really good one to be able to answer. But what I wanted to talk about, following on from what Wilfred was just saying, is really a slightly broader remit. Because it's really about distinguishing between your customers and your users. And they are often not one and the same thing. In most cases, for many forms of digital assistive technologies, your customers are government departments, funders, UN agencies. They are the ones who are going to buy and distribute your products. The users are people with disabilities. So when you're thinking of your customers, we have a question that emerges. How well do you understand the market you want to sell in? Back. I need new glasses. They're all just a blur that far away. Oh, is that what I'm doing? Am I in your way? Sorry. I'll come and stand over this side. Where was I? What was it? Users versus customers. We're going to talk about customers and how well do you understand your market. Now, this is especially important if you want to sell outside of your immediate community. And I'm going to go through some of this fairly quickly. But Linda, please, the slides, if you want to send them to anybody, if anybody wants them afterwards for things that I don't cover, please do. They're perfectly happy. So part of this is about understanding. Many of you are working in innovation, emerging and new technologies, digital assistive technologies. And the problem that we face is that most of the laws, rules, and guidelines that were written to provide assistive technology were not written with your products in mind. They were written to provide wheelchairs, mobility aids. They're written to provide spectacles, eyeglasses. And so often, the thinking about assistive technology has not been inclusive of the type of products you're developing. That is as true in Europe as it is in the United States, as I'm sure it is here in Africa. Well, but innovation has been happening so quickly in recent years. And this concept of disruptive innovation is one of the things you're at the heart of, finding new ways to change the market, to make things different. And there's some really good examples of this. You used to be able to buy, for instance, a dedicated GPS system to guide blind people from place to place. Yep. They cost $2,000 or $3,000 to buy at the time. That company's out of business because step-by-step guidance on Google Maps with voice output killed it overnight. We used to have a very vibrant and healthy communication aids market, with dedicated communication aids that did nothing other than help young people to communicate. That is almost non-existent now, and now what we see is apps, and tablets, and mobile phones at a fraction of the cost. But here's the problem. The rules for procuring and providing that equipment haven't changed. The criteria, the specifications haven't changed. So if you're just providing an app at a fraction of the cost, what happens if the procurement procedures say, no, we don't supply a tablet or a mobile phone to run it on? So even though your system costs $100, it needs a tablet. We would rather spend $4,000 on a dedicated communication system. And if you think that sounds crazy, that is still the basis of Medicare and Medicaid in the United States. In Germany, they will not provide products with a lens or a product that's used by more than 30% of the population, like a mobile phone. So these, as you go into the market, these are the background, the landscape which you need to be aware of. Going into a market without sufficient information is a recipe for disaster. So what I did, as I said, I've been really lucky in my career, been very privileged. I've worked in all sorts of parts of the world with startups from all different locations. But what we found over time was that some of these questions, the answers were different everywhere. Language, culture, history, legacy meant the answers were different, but the questions were the same. Let's go on. Next slide. Broken it. So there are all sorts of different funding mechanisms in different countries. Even within Europe, we find that a company started in one part of Europe thinks that within another part of Europe, they have the same system for funding things. Then they find out it's not, and they don't meet the criteria. So understanding how digital assistive technology is going to be funded is really important. And on these couple of slides, just got some explanations of a couple of different models of funding, where you can just think, okay, if I'm wanting to go from Kenya into Rwanda, how is it funded? What's different? What's common? What's the same? What's different? Moving on. Next slide. And these were the challenges we found. And we found this whilst we started in Europe. I did some work in Pakistan, Malaysia, Tunisia, Qatar, and another Islamic country. I forgot which one. It's bad. And this is what we found. These were the same. So digital assistive technology was not explicitly mentioned, or Pakistan was the other one, explicitly mentioned in most national policies. It may be implied, but support for the provision and funding may not be explicitly stated. That gives people a reason to say no. If it's not stated clearly, they can turn you down. I'm going to come on to challenges in definitions in a moment. A lot of the definitions have been driven by health services. Who's here from Accessi Maths? There's some people here from Accessi Maths, yeah? Yeah? Sorry? Assistive Maths, sorry, yes. Mine's a better name. Assistive Maths. So, why would the Department of Health be interested in your product? Yeah, it wouldn't. The Department of Health has got no interest in mathematics. Go back again, sorry. It is okay to come and hit me. Okay, it's good sign language when you just hit me. It makes the point. No interest at all. But if all the funding and the mechanisms are based upon health provision, they're not going to look at your product positively. So we need to understand where the funding's coming from on the basis to find out whether or not that's going to be receptive to what you're developing. We talked a little bit about variability in funding. Next slide, please. And this has meant that we've had to start thinking that the marketplace for traditional AT products is not the same as the marketplace for your products. Definitions might be consistent, but the identity may be quite different. So we're starting to see how digital assistive technology is different to traditional assistive technologies. And it's going to include mainstream technologies that are adapted for assistive use. Next slide, please. So we have all sorts of definitions. I know from experience that a lot of the definitions used in parts of Africa have been based upon and heavily influenced by definitions from elsewhere. But those definitions are sometimes quite old, but also they related to a specific region and country. But there are some interesting things. Americans with Disability Act. Assistive technology can be anything that helps a person with a disability perform a task. But that's probably not the bit that people quote in national policies. Next slide. World Health Organization. Assistive technology enables people to live healthy, productive, independent, and dignified lives. Reduces the need for formal health and support services. Without assistive technology, people are excluded, isolated, and locked into poverty. The Assistive Technology Industry Association in America talks about how AT can be low-tech or high-tech. It can be hardware or it can be software. Next slide, please. It can be products designed for everybody, which are inclusive of people with disabilities, or it can be products that are designed for a specific group of people with disabilities. Classic example. We have this discussion goes on sometimes about toilets that are accessible for people with disabilities. Based on universal design, those are inclusive things. They can be used by anyone. They're not actually designed just for people with disabilities. And that's a big difference in terms of our thinking about why they're there. And what I have learned is if there is a huge queue for the gentleman's toilet and no queue and nobody around who wants to use the accessible toilet, it's in everybody's benefit not to join the queue for all the men. Go and use the other one as well, because it's inclusive, it's available to everyone. And these sort of things are quite important sometimes in thinking. Next slide. UK government. And what I would just say at the end is when we're talking about digital AT, I used to do some studies on behalf of World Health Organization. One of the things they say in their definition very early on is that it is a subset of health technology. And I would argue every time it can be, but it is also a subset of educational technology, is a subset of productivity technologies, software applications in the mainstream. It's a subset of consumer technologies. Because the truth is, most assistive technologies do not care whether you're using it in employment, education, daily life, health, and so on. It's used across those settings. Now, the reason why I just wanted to talk about that a little bit is because when you come to think about a market, one of the first things you want to look at, what is the definition in this country, this region, this market of assistive technology? How do I pitch or shape my product to clearly meet that definition? If I can't, it may be very, very difficult to get people to add it to a list of approved products and so on. Let's go on. So we need to merge traditional assistive technology approaches with modern digital tools. We're moving to smart technologies, whether those are mobility canes, wheelchairs. I know we've got wearable technologies here, but they're currently driven by AI, sensors, connectivity, and the ability to analyze data. On to the next slide. Okay, you're going to see on some slides there is lots of words. Very bad, very hard to read. I'm not going to go through those. Those are there as extra information for you at a later stage. Let's go on to the next slide again. What I do want to say, though, is the distinction between traditional and digital technologies is blurring. It's blurring very quickly as digital features are embedded into designs. These are going to be very important to you sometimes if you're looking at disrupting a particular market. Let's go on again. So what by digital assistive technology? And you need to be clear on this when you're talking to customers as opposed to users. Users will love what you're doing. Customers may be quite apprehensive. What do we learn from people who supply assistive technology, who pay for it, is they are incredibly risk-aversive. They do not like new things very much. So you need to have a case as to why they should be prepared to take a risk. Price is an incredibly important one. If you can undercut the price of a traditional assistive technology, handheld magnifying devices were a great example. So you used to be able to buy a specialist handheld magnifier. It was electronic. People with low vision would use it to magnify text and blow it up big on the screen. They cost between $200 and $300 a piece. USAID used to provide them into parts of Africa, which was interesting because there was no way anybody was ever going to buy another one at $300 a time at that time. But now you can get an app that replaces the functionality of everything that was on that dedicated device to go onto your smartphone. And they cost between nothing and $5, depending on the features. When those companies who made the handheld magnifiers found out about these, they said, oh, but our customers love our products. They think we're great. They're very loyal. And they were very loyal, but if they were paying for them themselves and they could get 80 to 90% of the functionality for $5 rather than $200, how loyal do you think they stayed? No, they did not stay loyal. They ran away at speed to use, for no better reason. Who wants to carry, how many devices do we want to carry around with us at any one time? Well, in my case, about 6, but I'm a little bit obsessive around technology. But actually just being able to put everything onto a mobile phone had huge benefits to people. So all of these things are quite interesting. Digital assistive technology can be embedded into traditional AT. That integration may be something you want to make your customers aware of. Next slide. And that takes us into what we talk about as identity. Identity is a really interesting concept because it defines not only those things that we have in common, but also the things that distinguish us from one another. And each of us in this room have a slightly different identity. It might be where we were born, we might be men, we might be women, we might be age, it might be where we live, our life experience, our family, all contribute to our sense of identity. Complexity is common. Yeah. And when we talk about the identity for digital AT, we start with the idea of an ecosystem. Next slide. And this is going to be important to you in understanding your market. These are some questions to ask. First of all, because this is about market readiness. I used to talk about, is the market ready for your product? Is the soil fertile? If you plant your products into a market, will they grow and flourish? And certain things make that happen. And my question for you is, when you're looking at a market, ask yourself these questions. We've got 15 minutes, so we're going to answer a couple of these together. How will you make people aware that your product exists? If there isn't awareness, you will not stimulate demand. So awareness is now that is not quite the same as marketing. Awareness is a slightly more foundational, substantive issue. It might be about the type of product you're offering rather than the specifics of your product. So let's pick a product at random. Where's our Escort watch person? Right. How are you going to make people aware of your watch? Okay, I'm going to again distinguish between marketing and awareness. You may need to make people aware that a wearable technology has benefits for people with disabilities before you get into the detail of your product. But it may not just be your job. What you might also want to know, as you said, disabled people's organisations, how do they raise awareness? And can you work with them to raise awareness of what you're going to be offering and answer that so what question, why it's important? Be very cautious of just putting stuff out on social media. My experience with social media in almost every country in the world is you can spend a lot of time putting it out and you get very, very poor response. Most people on social media are interested in getting you to read what they say, not reading what you say. You have to use it, it's important, but focus it. So one of the things that we do a lot in social media is actually saying, where are the specific groups on things like LinkedIn, Facebook, where people with disabilities will be? So we target them in those groups. The important thing about digital assistive technology is you've got the potential of using the technology itself to promote awareness. You can share this into websites, into apps, to say, send it out onto Facebook for me. Send it out onto Blue Sky or X or wherever. You can't do that with a wheelchair. You can't say, touch this bit of the wheelchair and it will tell everybody on Facebook about your wheelchair. But you can do that with an app or software or a website. The second big area is who will be recommending your solution to the users? Who are those influencers, the people who actually make decisions about what is the right solution for your product for an individual? Because that's what's going to trigger payment. And if you know, for instance, those are occupational therapists used in a lot of countries, are they going to understand your product and why it's valuable? And there may be a very, very targeted group that you're going to need to reach to in terms of how you get to them. You have a completely different delivery model with software to dedicated things like wheelchairs. Things like wheelchairs have to be imported. They have to go through customs, have all sorts of things around testing, safety, and so on. Much of that is not in place, or not in place at all, for apps for phones. But here's a really good example of a problem that emerged. Really nice app for people with reading and writing difficulties and dyslexia. Available, Google Play, Apple Store. Spoke to procurement in 5 different countries. Said, oh no, we can't fund things through those. I said, oh, it seems a shame. Why is that? He said, because we must have 3 quotes for any item from different suppliers. And I was saying, but hang on, if you want to buy an app, there is only one supplier for the ecosystem, for that phone or tablet. No, in that case, we can't supply it. Here's our problem. This was written for wheelchairs, for crutches, for spectacles, not for the model of delivery that your products might be going through. So is there a problem if you are selling that through online stores, if you are the only provider of it, if you don't have resellers, multiple resellers, are the rules and regulations within the market going to make that difficult for you? And again, those are the sorts of questions you need to answer. Training and support. The great thing about digital assistive technology is you can build that into your product. You can say, click here to see a video of how to use this feature. Click here and connect to a support agency. Again, if it's a wheelchair, support means making a phone call, taking it back to the store, having it sent off for repair, waiting for 3 months for it to come back, finding out it's got broken on the way. Whereas if it's an app, they say, have you downloaded the latest version? No, download the latest version there, that should fix it. So our support mechanism is very difficult. Our way of delivering training is very different, which means that the total cost of ownership of your technologies often massively undercuts the total cost of ownership of traditional products delivering the same features, because you are building those things like on-demand training, technical support into the product itself. Because we know that without those, uptake and continued use of the technologies is likely to be poorer. Ask yourself the final question on this one. Who is responsible for the provision of assistive technologies in this country, this market? In federal countries, that may be 6 different states. They may all be delegated down to different states. And you need to have a relationship with them, because you want to make all these points to that body. Go on to the next slide. I'm just going to show you what else is here to help you with what's coming. I'm not going to go through it. Okay, we've got things around awareness and advice. Your best support for awareness and advice is your users. How can you make it easy for your users to tell other people about your products without needing to come through you? Putting reviews into social media, websites, and so on. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Advice and assessment. There are lots of changes happening in the way in which people are matched to technology. Artificial intelligence is allowing us to delegate decision-making to the people with disabilities themselves, rather than needing to have a gatekeeper. And there's some really interesting tools. Gary.info gives really detailed advice on mobile phones. AT-Visor on assistive technologies. There's projects in India, Dish that's trying to do the same, where we match people to a profile of users like you and recommend products people like you found useful to do the things that you want to do. That means maybe we haven't got to wait for 3 months for an appointment to see somebody, but actually can produce a list. The lower the cost of digital AT, the more it pushes us towards user-led choices. Next slide. Next slide. Provision and procurement. We're starting to see the growth of models of provision which say we give the money to the person with disabilities and they spend it on assistive technologies, or there's co-funding. There's a move in many parts of the world away from everything being procured centrally because the range of products is becoming so great and the cost of making those recommendations is increasing all the time. So there's a growth of personal budgets, however much, could be small or large, by which people can purchase some of the things they want. Next slide. Next slide. Training, talked about already. Really important thing, and I'm sure you all saw this, COVID-19 really meant that the desire for on-demand personal training grew massively. Remote training, training through a screen. That hasn't gone away, and that is an opportunity. But on-demand training in the form of things like videos, and more increasingly things like augmented reality, are going to be ways you can train your users so they don't need more complex training in the future. Also a very good way of training the family, supporters, teachers, and so on. Next slide. Same with support, talked about that already. Next slide. Talked about development, policy, and coordination. Next slide. Total cost of ownership is going to be very important here. So, okay, concluding thoughts. When you're looking at moving into a market, if your technology involves any sort of app, you have this big question. Do people with disabilities have the necessary phones to run those apps? With the connectivity, processing power. We know that in Africa there's been a long history of dumping cheap, low-powered mobile phones into different countries. The problem with many of those is they do not have everything that is required to run many of the assistive technologies that you and others are developing. If nobody will subsidize that cost, that is a problem. When I worked in the Middle East, we had a model where cost of a mobile phone was discounted by 50% by the sellers, as long as somebody had a disability card. That basically took their margin away for those people. But they did it because the regulator told them they had to. Provision should be inclusive, value-driven, and flexible. Provision should be based on impact, not specification. Does this technology make a difference in the lives of people with disabilities? I'm so tired, backwards and forwards. This is more walking than I've done in months, I tell you. It should be based on impact. Do your products make a difference? Do they fix a problem? Do they answer the so what question? And if they do, we want to see public policy that supports them. It should be digital-friendly procurement. Last time I was here, first time I met Bernard, I think, was it 2019, something like that? It's pre-COVID, wasn't it? Because I wouldn't have been here. We were sat down and we talked about innovation. And I can remember it was 6 years ago, it was starting. You had some projects, you had some products just coming through the incubator. It is amazing coming back to Nairobi 6 years later, sitting in this room and realizing you are just some of the innovations that are happening in Kenya and across the region, across the continent. That is something to be unbelievably proud of within 6 years. But that speed of change, that level of disruption, challenges everybody else around you. You, along with other advocates, are going to be the ones who need to make the case for change to make sure the benefits of your technologies, of digital technology, unlocked for any person with a disability. Thank you very much. Oh, any questions? Yes, we have similar problems in Europe. They're probably not as extreme as in Africa, because they're probably most procurement is a little bit wider. The way we've been trying to deal with it is to bring companies like everybody in here together and to find a way of speaking as a single voice to policymakers. So I would say that an organization like Enable, the more by which they can network with you all longer term to identify the problems and take that forward across the continent and with individual governments, rather than each person trying to have that influence, because they won't listen to you as a single company. But if it's about, here are 40 innovations which could save the public purse these millions of dollars, and we have a business case for that, you might be able to make a difference. But it needs to be collective rather than individual, I think. Yeah. Yep. So again, I mean, one of the big questions I've been asking with digital AT, so in Europe they introduced medical device regulations. It takes most of the products up to a year to write get all the documentation together, let alone get it approved. So what we've been saying, why are you asking for it? Because actually many of these items that you're insisting do this are not medical devices. They are assistive maths. So why would it need to go through a medical device regulation? Apple are never going to put an iPhone through MDR and regulations. With all of those assistive features and functions on it, they're never going to, there's no way they're going to put it through medical device regulations anywhere in the world. Neither will Google. Yep. Yep. Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Some of those regulations in other parts of the world are changing, but we also have new regulations coming around things like AI, which actually may make it harder for us to design and use AI for people with disabilities in the future, because they are so strongly privacy orientated. But yeah, I think, as I say, how can we shift away from the idea of the technologies being governed by things like health regulations, medical device regulations, and should require no further approval than any consumer device needs. Yes, if something is giving and so on, it probably needs to meet certain standards. Many of the things that we use, if they fail once, it's not something we're completely dependent on, not all the time. Sharon, I think you had a second question. I have no idea what it was now. There was another part to your question. I can't remember what it was. Okay. Market shaping. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I did some work for USAID, and it became very clear they were putting large numbers of Windows laptops into schools for children who weren't reading. Most of the teachers, their knowledge of technology was around Android. They'd given them tablets on Android, they all knew how to use them. The whole project failed because it was based on Windows. Basically, none of them really knew how to use Windows. So yeah, exactly. Is this a hint? Really? What are you trying to say? Thank you very much.